Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to this show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And also the premise of this show is the belief that only through true dialogue, accurate dialogue, can there be a shift in consciousness? And when there's a shift in consciousness, that's when you have a shift in your world, how you perceive things. It's based on the ideas that you have. Today's topic is something that's been near and dear to me for many years. And I hear a lot of discussions about black community. I hear a lot of discussions about who we are as the black community or what is the black community. And like a lot of things, if you don't understand the history of a thing, okay, any problem that you have on this earth, you will never fix it unless you know the history of how it got there. You can never fix a problem until you know the history. And we here at the Umoja Circle tend to talk in terms of the present moment, but we use a lot of historical facts to bring us up to why our situations and why the issue that we're talking about is pertinent. The topic today, along with my guest who I'll introduce in a moment, is the fact that I have this idea that that our African American community cannot exercise any kind of effective power, politically, socially, or otherwise, in America without simultaneously, at the same time, exercising economic power. If that is not happening, anything else to me is just pure fiction. And to help me have this conversation is a gentleman I've been trying to get on his show for many months, but because of his busy schedule. But I'm glad that he was able to make it for the show, and I'd like to welcome to the Umoja Circle, Brother Born Logic Allah. Yes. Brother Born Logic Allah is a dynamic and interesting person here that we're lucky to have here in San Antonio. You might have noticed a couple of months ago, I had another brother, Baba Andar Ma'at, and I introduced y'all to his documentary. I think I put up the video. Yeah, it's called Walk on the River, History of the Alamo City. A black history of the Alamo City. This gentleman also is a co-producer and also the owner, part owner of Melanized Production, media. Mm-hmm. So, and who can I have this kind of conversation about communities and the history and why it functions the way than somebody who actually did the footwork. He used San Antonio as his subject, but the same issue that happened, I think your document goes back to the mid-1860s, right? Yes. Until the early mid 20th, yeah, mid 20th century. Mm-hmm. But it scans the area of what I want to talk about. We're going to talk more about the history on the second show. It's going to be a two-part discussion. But we want to start out about why is it necessary and important to talk about and discuss and protect the African American community. I know I kind of try to concentrate a whole lot of information in the few seconds that we have, but I think we'll do okay. Yeah. What do you have to say about the power of and the necessity of protecting, defending, and developing our black communities today?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Community is important. That's our base. You know, when I look at the word community, you can see two words within it. It's common unity, of people who have a common unity.
Good point.
And so when we have our communities, that's really what we raise our families from. That's kind of our base. That's how we get together and organize. That's how we have conversations. That's how we find out what we have alike or what we have in difference, whether it be opinion different styles of living, but ultimately we should have a common goal for us as a people. So our community is like the base.
Is our foundation, right?
Absolutely.
And also, it is where we should concentrate our wealth as a people.
Absolutely.
And that's informed. See, I feel that any group who has control over important economic resources, along with the ability to make those important economic decisions, anybody who has that kind of power will control a lot of things that happen around them, okay? And if you have a community where you control the economic basis of your people, you have more say in this system.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I do, but not only that, it actually helps you, because most communities, when you look at, a lot of times we say, well, the black dollar leaves the community,
Yeah.
maybe after one turnover.
One turnaround, yeah.
And so other communities, some people say the Jewish people turn theirs over 7 times before it leaves their community.
Yeah.
So it's important, not only the economic base, a lot of people look at money as something other than what it really is. Money is a resource. When you have economic power, not only are you able to influence the politics of your community,
exactly,
you're able to employ people. And that's one of the biggest things that I often think about, is that if you have the resources, you can employ people, because a lot of our problems come from lack of opportunity. So if you can employ your own people, if you can provide them with a means by which to make a way for them, for their family, you're empowering others. And the more powerful we are as a group, as we are individually, the more powerful we can be as a group.
And let me see if I understand what you just said. In other words, you're saying a strong and viable community are the ones that are able to concentrate their wealth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Within the boundaries of that community.
Absolutely.
All right? The concentration of wealth. You hear in politics, they're talking about a fear of the concentration of wealth, of power from one particular group to another.
Yeah.
Because the more concentration there is, the more powerful that group can, whether it's economic power, political power, or some kind of power.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned in my studies, and again, a lot of my information will come from my studying of a brother who has a think tank that is a nice resource that people should know about, and that's brother Dr. Claude Anderson. He's been doing a lot of research since the 60s, and he's been doing a lot. He wrote 5 books on economics, and he focuses on us and our issues. Okay, the reason you don't hear him because of how he does that. He goes against the grain of what people, because when people who look like us come out with their theories, they're talking about everybody. But he always say, what about black people? What about us? And he came up with a vision of what you're talking about, a community. So imagine a community as a 5-story building, okay? Strong brick building. Instead of thinking of it as something that is spread out and diluted out in many ways, everybody individually doing their own thing. If you concentrate and engineer this building, what do you first do? You build the foundation. The foundation is the first floor of that building, the structure. That is your wealth. That's the economics. The second level of that building is the politics. The third level is the criminal justice system. The fourth level is your communications. And the fifth level, that's your educational system. But at the foundation of all those aspects of a community, if you don't have that control of all those aspects of your community, you don't have a community. You have to use your wealth, concentrated wealth, to go and control the political system. Between the politics, if you want to open up, say, a business center or a business district in your black community, you need the politicians who are going to pass the law that'll benefit your community, allow that, where you can get black business owners to concentrate in those districts. If you don't have that, if you just ask them, it's not going to work. Wealth our economic wealth is what controls that. And then you have them control the criminal justice system, okay, using that wealth, using the power. And then the next level, you go to buy up communication systems, TV stations, the communication system. And then you send our kids to the universities, and then they have reasons to come back to those communities because of the businesses that you would have. And that's the vision that you have to have. How many black people have that vision of that kind of structure of a community? How many people even have this conversation? That's why we're talking about the role of the community in this discussion.
Indeed.
What do you have to say about that structure?
I do. I can see that. You know, I might number it differently with certain things.
Yeah, I got you.
But ultimately, I agree with that.
Because we need think tanks. I mean, we have what I'm talking about. We have to have strategies.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of a think tank.
Yeah.
Where's our think tanks? Every group, every ethnic group, like you said, had a think tank. You have Jewish think tank. You got Latino think tank. You got Italian think. All of them are coming up with theories and research that the people in their communities can come to and ask questions and come up with input.
Indeed.
Where do we have that? You know, that's some of the problems. We just listed the problems. We hope to come up with some solutions by the end of this discussion. But right now we're trying to let people know what we're up against. You know, what do you have to say, my brother?
I definitely think we should have think tanks and places where we can talk and bounce ideas off one another, communicate. I think a lot of that is happening online sometimes. I know that at the end of the month they're having, I know George Fraser and Boyce Watkins are talking about the United Black Summit in Houston. So I think there are different organizations and people that are striving to come together.
But do we have a true network as a black community? A good example in your video, you talked about a gentleman back in I think the 30s, Bollinger.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the person that we need. That's the sense of you showed that we had that here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
You know, where you had this concentration of wealth. You know, a lot of it was because of the racism of segregation, but it forced us to work as a group of people within a boundary, what we call the East Side. You said some of us were even on the West side of town.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but Bellinger, he had a power, economic power, and where he could go to City Hall, right? Tell us a little bit about the model of what we're talking about, how a community should work.
Indeed. Charles Bellinger was a political boss in San Antonio. He had gained his money. He started out really gambling. He kind of transformed that illegal money into legal money, and so he was able to own a cab company. He had real estate that he
concentrated
owned.
Businesses.
Absolutely. He had a lot of things that he owned, and so what would happen was during the time of the poll tax where a person had to pay to actually vote, a lot of people in our community couldn't afford that poll tax. So he would pay the poll tax for people and then suggest who they should vote for.
That bottom part of that structure I'm talking about,
Indeed.
use that wealth for political.
And so he would get the people to kind of vote in one way.
As a
and
block.
it would sway a mayoral election, a city council election.
That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
the concentration of wealth. We don't do that anymore. We we attempt to,
Yeah.
but that's the model that we all should be working towards.
I think I think it's going to be a challenge to do things how they have been, and I think that's part of the issue because I don't know if we can I think we have to kind of redefine what a community is because it used to be a section of town, and I don't know if that's going to happen per se anymore. There may be pockets of people, and I think San Antonio might be a good example because the East Side was the black community.
Yeah.
But it's really not anymore.
It's spread out.
Yeah, it's a lot of people on the Northeast Side, or some people on the North Side. And I think that ultimately, regardless to where you live, I think if we have common goals and things that we have in common, we can still move together, even if we're not in the same physical
And I
locality.
agree. The community is not have to be a geographical level. It has to have a sense of level. It starts with the mind.
Mine.
When I use the word community, I'm not talking about a land mass. I mean, it can be.
Yeah.
Well, however you concentrate the wealth, but you have to have the sense of community. Got to be something that's culturally motivated.
Indeed.
And you have to understand that. Whether you concentrated on in an internet banking system,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's how you manipulate. But the same principle is to manipulate the political system. We as a people, and a lot of people don't realize that there was a Forbes magazine survey that says as of, I think it was like 2017 or 2018, but as a people, we have approximately $1.3 trillion in spending wealth, okay? We every year, 1.3 trillion. Every black community across the world where there's black population in the majority. When you talk about Africa or throughout the Caribbean and parts of Europe, the total amount is estimated something like 26 million. But the dominant group, the dominant Europeans who controlled this system, this capitalist system for the last 400, 500 years, their total wealth is approximately 300 trillion. And for people, I want to make them understand what I'm just talking about, $1 trillion. You imagine a room stacked with $1 trillion bills. It's physically impossible, but just use this thought process. If ICE can do it, we can do it. And you give $1 to people off, $1 at a time. It would take you 36,000 years to empty that space. That's $1 trillion.
Yeah.
We spend that yearly as a people, but yet we're still struggling to have people support our businesses. We're still not concentrating our wealth in a sense because every group does that to this very day. Every group that came through Ellis Island from Europe that would then turn white by a particular decision in the early 20th century, the first place they went was to that Jewish community that was established, or that Irish community for those who came off ships in the mid 1840s, or some other communities or later on in the 20th century after the Korean War, the Korean communities, Vietnamese communities. The first thing they did was culturally concentrate their wealth.
Indeed.
And then use that wealth for a common goal.
Indeed.
That's the pattern that we still are lacking, even if some people are trying to do that.
Right.
And I recognize that
I
point.
think that one of the problems, though, is that I think even before the Jewish, before the Italians, we were the first to do that.
I agree.
However, what happened was there's such intimidation about us congregating and coming together. There were mass efforts to destroy.
And that's the stuff that I was going to talk about in the second show, throwing the history of why we got in this situation. You're absolutely
I don't
right.
want to jump ahead there.
No. We could go weave in and out. We'll focus more on why they'll do because you're right. There is a reason why we've done that. Again, you can't solve a problem unless you understand the history that lead up to it. And this show is always talking about. But right now, we're just laying out the difficulty that we're having, some of the things that we're attempting to do. You're from a generation that more used to the technological thing. I'm a baby boomer, okay? You know more about how the internet, because you mentioned that there are certain you are used to communicating with people through that media. In fact, you are, when I wanted to communicate with somebody back in the 70s, I had to call them on the phone and talk or mail a letter, and that took 2 to 3, if it got there 2 to 3 days, I was like amazed that it got there that fast, but you are used to this type of instant, how is that working through this problem of, are we forming, let's say, how would you put it, an internet community? In a
Yeah.
sense, that's what you're trying to explain that to people
Well,
like me who are more of the older school. I have to see and touch.
indeed.
Yeah.
No, I think the internet helps. You know, you can't get caught up in it. But one thing it does allow for people who might not live in a specific locality
Hmm.
to still know what's happening, to still be in touch with what's going on.
Better access to people.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 60s, people like Kwame Ture had to physically go into Mississippi,
Yes.
you know, and go through the gauntlet of the Ku Klux Klan or
Yes.
what other white supremacist organization that physically were blocking them.
Yes.
You know, many of our black communities, even viable black communities like Black Wall Street,
Yes.
it was still surrounded by hostile white communities,
Absolutely.
you know, that were always jealous of our accomplishment.
Indeed.
And again, I'm going to try to make people understand why they look at us that way. It's no coincidence, you know, and I'm a little teaser. I believe that we were socially engineered, not only black communities, but white communities and how we think. And I'll explain that, I hope, later on,
Okay.
how that conditioning happens. And you got to understand there's many threads. There's no one answer. This is a complex, the present moment is complex, you know, but it was sent to us by some past event. I call the present moment the present moment. It's not only a present, a gift to us. You sent yourself a present moment, this reality, by choices that you made when you first talked to me weeks ago.
Indeed.
Right? If you had made a totally different decision, will we be doing this act?
Absolutely not.
So the present moment is always rooted in the past.
Absolutely.
And we have to understand that. You know, unless you understand psychologically, we could have all kinds, the behaviors of our people are not the problem. It is the ideas that we're working on that produces the behavior. And if we don't change the idea, that's why I talk about the show, if you don't take the shift in conscience to change your world, that's what I mean.
And that's why I honestly think education has to be closer to the bottom, because people don't do unless they know.
I agree.
And a lot of times we don't invest the proper way because we don't know. We don't deal with our present the proper
agree.
way because we
You're
don't
absolutely
know our
right.
history.
I understand. You're absolutely right. Now, I was a single parent. And I raised two black men, okay, that I always tell them knowledge is power. Why do you think our ancestors back in Kemet or Egypt, for those of you who might not know that, familiar with that word, said that know thyself, okay? Every behavior that you have and I have, conscious or unconscious, is based on a conscious or unconscious ideas. And who produced the ideas. And that's why in the second show, I'm gonna tell you how we were socially engineered to think certain way, to produce certain behaviors.
Indeed.
You know, so you're right that education is important, but underneath all of that is wealth.
Indeed.
You know, I know there might be some people who are thinking, well, you know, we got these black athletes, we got people with this money and all that. Well, the average football player stays about 4 years? Not the one you see for 10, 20 years. The average. They make some good money, but most of them, by the time that 4 years is up, are broke, even though they made $50 million or
Absolutely.
100. Why is that? It's because of the idea. Nobody taught them, our people, how to manage their money.
Right.
Most of the people around them are trying to siphon off as much money, not teach them how to build wealth. And another thing I will tell people when I have this discussion, there is a difference between earning an income and having wealth. Income is an index of consumption. $1.3 trillion will be. But if you're just constantly spending that's spending power. Wealth is the ownership of property, land, factories, businesses. We're only 2% of the wealth is owned by black businesses. Okay? The rest of us work for somebody else. and we're getting an income, but they could hire us and fire us.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though we're making, $50,000 or $100,000 as a people, we're still at the same level of wealth earning that we were before the Civil War in December, that started in December of 1860. Mm-hmm. In November, there was something like 300,000 so-called free. I will put that question mark, mm-hmm. So-called, because we still were controlled by the dominant group. And out of that, only 2%, because most of them were working, usually as maids or plumbers or part of the artisan lives. And artisans were the people who had the skills, bricklayers and all those people. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of that stuff, but we did it for other people. Mm-hmm. But there were only 2%. Fast forward to 2019. Proportionally to the population. Mm-hmm. There's 46 million of us as people of African descent, majority mm-hmm. female. And out of 330 million total of the population of America, guess what our wealth earning that we have the total of the people. This is based on the Harvard Institute that is owned by Brother Claude Anderson, 2%. Mm-hmm. So how advanced have we made in the last 154 years? Mm-hmm. From 1860, where we only own 2% of the total wealth of America. Mm-hmm. There was 5 million of us. 300,000 of us were were either freed slaves or freed for some reason. We only own 2%. Mm-hmm. So how can we say we've made it? If wealth is the means by which this system this is the blood of this society that we're trying to function in this monopoly game, is run on economics. Mm-hmm. Yet we're still owning 2% of the total wealth of this country 154 years after 1865 when we were free.
Indeed.
How do you feel about that?
It's definitely not a good, I'm not happy about that number.
That's what we're
Don't
up
get me excited.
That's what we're up against as a people. Again, if you don't understand the history, you won't be able to fix the problem. Right. This is what we're up against. And how many people are working towards that goal to level the playing field? Yeah, we could ask for reparations. I agree, we need reparations. Mm-hmm. After 246 years of unpaid labor, and another 99 years from 1865 to 1964 of Jim Crow segregation, which is another form of process. Mm-hmm. That's what we're up against as a community. Mm-hmm. And we were a 246-year head start by the dominant white group who created a system that funneled all the wealth to them. Indeed. Where did that wealth go for that was started, from Jamestown, and all the wealth going to Europe and coming back, and all the we picked at the eve of the Civil War something like 8 billion tons of cotton. Mm-hmm. Black people. Who benefited when they sold it to England at 48 cents a pound? Mm-hmm. Where did that wealth go to? It didn't go to us.
No, definitely not.
I want to make sure that you understand. We will continue this discussion in the next show. So until next time, peace, hotep, goodbye.